Bruchim Abayim to Nichsefo Nafshi. Welcome back, everybody. Dovid, first I want to wish you a Mazel Tov and your Chanukah Sabayis, upcoming Chanukah Sabayis. Should be a Bayis Nema B'Yisrael. Welcome to Torah, Tefillah, and Avodas Hashem. Dovid doesn't need any introductions. He's a veteran here in our shul in Muncie. No further ado, Dovid, please tell us some gematriyos for this week.
First, I always feel the need to reiterate. I mean, among the Breslov, you'll know about Sichas Chaverim. For those who don't know, in Likut Moran Lamed Daled, Rav Nachman says that a person needs to have 3 conversations with the tzaddik, with the Rebbe, with the Rebbeinu Shalom first, the conversation with the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's first, with the tzaddik, with the Rebbe, and with Sichas Chaverim. Because every year there's something else that another year doesn't have that he could help someone out with. And just on a simple level, I know many times, you hear a Rav speak about something, you think, all right, fine, he's a Rav, he's in the business, he enjoys learning, but sometimes, you hear friends say something, it's like, wow, that guy, he enjoys a shtickle flesh just like me, so to speak. So, and he could do that, so whatever it is, whether he's learning this or learning, whatever, if he could do it, then I could do it also. He's not a professional. He's not a professional in Ruchlius, and he could do it, so then I could do it. So, but this upcoming week is jam-packed, so it's hard to know where to start between Pesach Sheni on Sunday and Lag BaOmer. So I was thinking on my drive back from Brooklyn now that
Today was Rapsis, right?
Today was Naftali Rapsis' yard site, so we could go, so maybe we'll try to fit him in also. But Pesach Sheni, the Olam says, and I was very close with the Lulav Rebbe, who Ramelech Biederman's father, I'm sure everyone knows Ramelech Biederman. His father was one of the Lulav Rebbes who I was close with, and he always used to make a tish. He used to be in New York very often for Pesach Sheni, and he would always say it's makubal that it's Rav Meir Balanes's yard site. And so the Olam says, is it not? But Sataka heard from his son, who's the Lulav Rebbe of Borough Park. He says, just like after the Holocaust, people were told if they didn't know, when the yard site was of their parents, they would pick a date, and then it had all the dinim of a yard site. He says so too. He was talking Binyan Rebbe Elazar ben Rav Shimon, actually, the Chafei El, the Olam says it's a yard site. So since the Olam says it also, it gets to, when Klal Yisrael says that, it gets that din also. But I saw Taka last year. There's a Rav in Sidrash, Rav Daniel Gladstein Shlita, who has a Sefer L'Kadmei and all about Rameh Balnas, and he quotes from a Sefer Nachlas Avos from a Rav Yosef Mashash. I'm not sure exactly who it was, but he said he saw in a Sefer that quoted from somewhere else that there was a medrash that says that Rameh Balnas passed away on Pesach Sheni, on Leil Shishi, on a Pesach Sheni. But whatever it is, irrelevant whether it is or not, and the people even want to say about Rashbi, is it the yard site? Obviously, Klal Yisrael says it's the yard site, it is, and the Aruch HaShulchan himself brings that, and the Aruch HaShulchan himself says not only was it the yard site, it was the day he came out of the Mara. They came out of Mara, and almost stumbled both, came out of the cave. So whatever it is, irrelevant. The bottom line is that we hear in the world about Rav Meir Balnas, and we hear about Rashbi in these days, that if someone even if someone wants to be a naysayer, not to take advantage of the messages that Rav Meir Balnas and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai teach us is just foolish, because there's so much chizuk that I personally have gotten from them, and it's mamish, endless the amount that you could learn from both of them, just the chizuk that they could give to anyone. So I want to start off with a piece from Rav Nosson in Likutei Halachos, Hilchos Gvias Chayv Miyasamim, Gimel Yurches, where he talks about, so first as introduction, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Torah of Ayeh. So just Bekitzer, for those that might not know, that in Ayeh, that Rav Nachman says, even those Yidden, even a Yid that falls to the lowest Madrega, we're talking, the lowest, a Yid could always come back. He said that there's this Basor Mamaris Neva'ilam, and the Gemara talks about it. It only says it's 9 times by Yoma, but it says that Bereshis Nami, that Bereshis is another Maimer, is also a Maimer, and through Bereshis, whatever that means, that it gives the koyach for everyone to come back, for any yid to come back. When he screams that I am a Kavoidai, basically when a yid says he wants to come back, there's always hope for him. So Rav Nosson says that Pesach Sheni teaches us that lesson, because the Yidden came to Moshe Rabbeinu and they said, Lama Nigara, so the Pshat is that they were Tameh and they weren't able to bring the cover in Pesach, but he says in a deeper level, it means that those Yidden that are not holding by whatever Madriga, and they just say, Lama Nigara, I want a second chance. Pesach Sheni is a lesson of a second chance for every Yid. So he said by connecting to Tzaddik Emes, so connecting to the teachings of Tzaddikim, especially to the teachings of Rav Nachman, the Kuti Moran, the Aye, that's the lesson of Pesach Sheni. There's always a second chance. So that actually is Rameya Balnas, which is actually is a famous teaching of Rameya. Rameya Balnas is Rameya in the Gemara that he teaches. There's a Gemara in Kedushin Lamed Vav Amar Aleph, where Rabbi Yehuda says that when we act like Banim, we're called Banim. When we don't like Banim, we're not called Banim. And Rameya says, Ben kach and ben kach atin kurim Banim. No matter what, we're called Banim. And then he goes on to bring 4 psukim to prove it. So now also I want to bring everything together to try to bring, I want to say that the teaching of Azamra is in here also, I want to say, in this Gemara. So, just to review quickly, the teaching of Azamra is that's in the Torah Reish Pei Beis in Likutei Moran, that the Rav Nachman teaches that by looking, we should look for, even if we see someone who's a Rasha, to look for one good thing he did. Not to say that he's a good person, but look, he once put on tefillin, look for one good point someone did, and by doing that, he goes into whole explanation there, how explaining with psukim how this works, you could bring that person to actual tshuva. And he says the same thing with yourself. You shouldn't think, oh, who am I? By a person should look for the good things in himself, and by that he could bring himself to complete tshuva. So of course, anyone sitting here, right? We all put on tefillin today. We all daven. We could look for numerous things. So I want to show how this is actually in this Gemara. I'll see if I could try to explain it. Since it's the Indian of Rameya Balnas and Pesach Sheni coming up, and since Rameya is connected to Pesach Sheni, so in the Gemara, so Rabbi Yehuda says, let me look for the actual lashon. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Bizman she'atem noigim minag banim, atem kurim banim." At the time when you act like banim, you call banim. In atem noigim minag banim, in atem kurim banim. Div Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir Oima, ben kach atem kurim banim. And then he goes on to bring different pesukim. First, I want to say this is Parshas Emor this week. Parshas Emor in a regular year, in a non-leap year, kamat every year, at least in Chutz La'aretz, the week of Hod is Emor. At the majority of the times, and Emor is the Reish Mem Aleph, which is Rameya Omer. That's Rameya Omer, and it's also, the Ramaz Yartzeit is like Baima. Maybe we'll get to that also, and that's Isis Ramah. So we know that the teaching of Azamra is that we have to look for a good point that you always did. So we see, so Rabbi Yehuda says, Bizman, at the time when you're acting like a ben, you're a ben. And Rameya says, Ben Kakameka Atakran Banim, and then he goes on to bring different pesukim. So first he brings a pasuk saying, he says, a pasuk that says, that recalls foolish children. So he says, let me just find the pasuk here. He says, there's a pasuk that says we're called banim scholim, foolish children. Then he brings another pasuk banim leumin bam, that where children don't have any loyalty. And then he brings another pasuk zer marei and banim ashchisim, which Rashi says is talking about banim, people worshiping avodah zarah, mamash the worst. And he says we're still called banim. So. And then he brings one more pasuk that says in the end we're gonna do tshuva. So Rabbi Yehuda didn't know these pesukim. So actually, I should mention the Chuvas Rashba. There's two Chuvas Rashba, Kuf, I think Kuf Tzadi Dalet and Reish Mem Beis. I wrote about this many times. That's the only reason why I know it. But that he says that Chuvas. I think it's Reish Mem Beis. If not, whatever. If anybody, if it's not the right source, you can get in touch with me, or you could probably Google and find it. That the Chuvas Rashba says that this is even more interesting. Usually, the Gemara Neverin says we usually do not pass like Rameya. Rabbi Yehuda against Rameya, Rabbi Yossi against Rameya. We don't pass like Rameya. And another place the Gemara says that no one could understand Rameya. He was such a genius. He could prove that Tameh was Tar was Tameh. We can't understand Rameya, so we don't pass like him. But in this case, we do pass like him, and in a few other cases we do pass like Rameya. So the Rashba says, since he has psukim to prove his point, he paskins like we do paskin like Rameya, and then as far as I'm going to other reasons why we paskin like him. Maybe we'll get to that. But what I want to bring on here is that Rameya is showing how we're called foolish children, we're called banim that worship Avodah Zarah. But bottom line is it says we're called banim. So I want to say that's a zamra. The zamra is because there's another Torah, this Reish Pei Beis. There's the Reish Pei Beis, which is a zamra, but there's another Torah in Tinyana, Chaf Gimel, I believe it is, where no, sorry, I think it's Torah Tes, Torah Yud. Right. In Torah Yud, he says that a person has to bring himself to Simcha, even if he's not in Simcha, by looking for his Nekudas Tovos. And he said, and he brings in that the Azamra, and he says, "Val kol panim yesh lo l'smayach b'mash zachal liyas mizari Yisrael." He says, "At least you should be happy that you're from Zeri Yisrael." Shalai yasani goy, kamesh anu amrim baruch lekinu sharban l'chleidai. So that's what he says in Torah Yud and Tinyana. So one of the psukim that Rameya brings here is Zera Merayim Banu Mashchisim, that a seed of evildoers, the way that the Archcom translates it, children that act corruptly, and this is the pasuk that Rashi says is mamash dining of Avodah Zarah. So talking about the lowest level it could be, but we see that Rameya says the first of Rameya we know is the one that says that he says that he's the one that paskins even by a davamuat that we're worried about even a miyat. That's why I heard a friend of mine told me that what's such a big deal? You give a quarter to Rameya Balnas, you give a quarter because he was chayish lamiyat Rameya in the Gemara. Since he's chayish lamiyat in the Gemara, so even a little to Rameya is a big thing. So we see this chayish lamiyat. This is Rameya, he's chayish lamiyat. So you have to look for even the he's worried about even a small little part. So we see that Rameya looks. You're right. He says, don't look at the banim mashchisim. Look at just the banim part. He's still called a ben. He's still called a ben. So yeah, you need to do tshuva, but you still called a ben. You're son of Rabbeinu Shalom, and a ben is a ben, no matter what, right? When there's a husband and wife, that relationship could be ended, right? That relationship with there's something called a get. But a ben is a ben no matter what. You could throw a ben out of the house. He's always a ben. So that's where Rameya shows that he shows here. So Rabbi Yehuda is saying that once upon a time, maybe he said when you act like a ben, you're a ben, but otherwise not. Rameya says, look at the Azamra. That the bottom line is he's called a ben, and even though you call Zar Mashchis, and that's what it says in the Likutim Ran Tinyana. He says there that the person should think that remember that you're from Zeri Yisrael. So he's saying, yeah, even if you're dealing Avodah Zarah Chas v'Shalom, but remember you're from Zeri Yisrael. Remember that you're a Yid, and this should bring you back. And then he brings in the last pasuk saying that Bnei Kel Chai, which is a pasuk from Hosea, which is actually the Haftarah read before Shavuos in Parshat Bamidbar. If it's not Machal Chodesh that we read, that Hosea goes and tells. He says to the Rabban Shalom, such trade clash for another nation. Hashem gets very angry at him because of that, and he says, don't say this again. And then in that haftarah there it says, it has the pasuk that Hashem says the Bnei Kel Chai. So over there, Hashem saying that in the end they're going to come. That pasuk says that we're going to do tshuva. So we see that in Hosea, that over there Hashem, I guess, gives it to Hosea, so to speak. And in the end, Hosea is the one that teaches us tshuva, because Shabbos Shuvah we read from Hosea, and it says the Medrash says that Reuven was the first one to teach us tshuva, to did tshuva on his own, and it says Hosea came from Reuven, and he's the one that teaches us tshuva, and so that's what I want to say. That Rameh Balanas is the one that teaches us. He's the one that teaches us tshuva. He's the one that's I think we could see that if it's understandable, we can mamash see in this Gemara the teaching of Zamar, because he's saying, because we do paskin like Rameh, ben kach ben kach banim, we paskin like him, and he's saying you're right, the din of avodah zarah, but the bottom line is a kolder ben, there's still bottom, and you concentrate on that ben, and the last pasuk Rameh brings says that we're going to do tshuva in the end, and that's one of the reasons why I say we do give tzedakah to Rameh Balanas. Is because there's a Gemara in Bava Basra Daf Yud where Rameh says we give tzedakah to save us from Gehenna, and then it brings the Maisa Rabbi Akiva, who is the Rebbe of Rameh Balanas.
I gotta give serious tzedakah then.
Yeah, he argued for Turnus Rufus Arasha. Turnus Rufus says you're not allowed to give tzedakah. He says why? He says I'll give you a mashal. He says if a king has a eved and he rebels against the king throws him in jail. You're going to go give him food. The king's going to be angry. Rabbi Akiva says, I'll give you a better mashal. The king has a son and he rebels and he throws him in jail. If you're going to feed the king's son now, the king's going to be happy. He doesn't want his son to die. So we see Rabbi Akiva himself, the Rebbe of Rameh, says that we're called banim, that we're sons of the king. And who's the one that teaches that? The one that said the tefillah of Avinu Malkeinu is actually Rabbi Akiva. He's the one that teaches Avinu Malkeinu. He's the one that teaches that we are the son of a king. And actually, Rav Yosef says he brings another reason why we do pasuk like Rameh, even though usually we don't. He has a sefer Anaf Eitz Avos on Pirkei Avos, where he brings where Rabbi Akiva says we're called Banim L'Makom. Rabbi Akiva in Pirkei Avos. Actually, I think it's this week. It's this week that we can tie it into this week's Pirkei Avos. Rabbi Akiva says we're called Banim L'Makom, and we should. So Rav Yosef says we see that Rabbi Akiva and who is the Rebbe of Rabbi Yehuda and Rameh says that we'll call the ben also. So we see it's not just Rameh. So that's why we are called Banim. So because that's why we're allowed to give tzedakah, because we're called banim. If we're not banim and we're just an avid, we wouldn't be allowed to give tzedakah. So every time we give tzedakah, that's why and also the tzedakah of Rameh Balanas isn't just, this tzedakah of Rameh Balanas that Maria Assad brings in a tshuva. Maria Assad was a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer. He has a tshuva where he says it was established by the Beis Yosef and the Al Shech HaKadosh. So the posik of Klal Yisrael, the Baal Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, and Al Shech HaKadosh established its tzedakah, and then there's other svarim that explain many other reasons why, which we could mamish go on for hours about why we get tzedakah. Shamshon Shapoli explains the whole how Alakadam Yanini Al Pi Kabbalah is connected to a Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Yuches, where Rameh rescues his niece from the Romans who they threw into Batei Zionis, and he rescued her from there, and he threw something at the dogs there, and he said Al-Kadam Anani, and he shows Al Pi Kabbalah how Al-Kadam Anani is different gematriyos, which are connected to Klavim, which are connected to Amalek, and it's Mamish, and the Munkat Sharav in Divrei Torah and in Shari Zaska explains it even more, and it's Mamish a fascinating thing. Maybe we'll get back to it another time. But the bottom line is that's one thing, and then we have the Rav Meir Schava, Rav Shem Bayichai. Yeah.
Are you saying that the tzedakah from Merabav is the big thing, or tzedakah?
So tzedakah anywhere is a big thing, but Rameh there's so much connected into it. Rameh, because of Rameh and Rabbi Akiva teaching that we're called banim, we're allowed to give tzedakah. This farm talk about this is a sefer that the Shvili Pinchas brings.
That the particular Merabav
So Rameh Balnes is a tzedakah meant for Talmidei Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael, but really any tzedakah is, anytime you give tzedakah is showing this point. So actually the Munkat Rav brings, actually, he says that, he saw in a country somewhere that Rabbi Aaron Kalina used to give tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael for Rameh Balnes by Shacharis. Because like this, he was davening derech arza. Because like it reminds him he's davening towards Eretz Yisrael. And the Munkat Rav says another reason is because of this connection of Rameh Balnes to the klipa of Amalek, the different klipas of Amalek that he brings in different. That is which is much more complicated. I want to get into because there's a lot of gematrios there. And he says so it fights. He says those kalavim come and attack our tefillas. So the Munkat Rav says that's another reason to give money to Rameh Balnes before davening. Is because of this Indian that it protects you from these kalavim of Amalek that come to and attack our tefillas. So yeah, so it's so there's mamash a lot in there.
And when's this your take?
Rameh Balnes. So it's makobel by many that it's Pesach Sheni, which will be Sunday. So and then of course we have Lag Baima, and we all know the first piece of in Likutei Moharan talks about the greatness of Rashbi. Right, and in Koich V'Yar, near the end of Koich V'Yar, if you want the exact location, you could get into it, but it's somewhere near the end of my version of Koich V'Yar. He brings there that there was a Talmud of, much of a Talmud of Nosson, he was traveling somewhere, and they told him there's a certain tzaddik in the town he could stay by. I don't know if it's the Rav of the town, and he went into the Rav's house, he sees a Likutei Moharan lying there, and he says, where do you get the Sefer? You know about the Sefer? He says, yeah, you know about the tzaddik Reb Nachman. He says, oh, I'm a Breslov Chassid. I'm not sure if it's during the life of the Rebbe or not. So he said, do you know why he starts off with the Torah of the Chazu, which we'll go through in a minute? So he said, no, please tell me. He says, because Shimon ben Yochai is the same gematria as Nachman ben Simcha, and your Rebbe had the same neshama of Shimon ben Yochai. So that's why he starts off with that Torah, which explains, because it's not an introduction, it's just put here in the beginning. And so what I want to suggest, I mean, not my suggestion, what have been said is that in Likutei Moharan, it's an explanation of how to live through the teachings of Rav Shimon ben Yochai and how to bring it to life. Azamra and all the Torah is different of how to actually live it, because the Zaya is, is a closed book, and so he explains and brings it down to earth. So we'll see how maybe we'll get to different Ramazim, how what Breslov Hasidim say, how the Moharan is actually Shimon is Gematria Likutei Moharan actually, and it's brought in Koich V'Yar also that the day of Lag Ba'ima will always be the day of the Rebbe's yard site. It's the same day of the week.
What do you
So
mean by the Torah as a closed book?
that the Zohar Kodesh.
Oh, the
The
Zohar.
Zohar Kodesh. I mean, yeah, the Zohar Kodesh. That the Zohar Kodesh is. Yeah, I mean, really, everything's a closed book. I mean, and we need tzaddikim to explain it to us. That's what we have. We have Chazal. We have the Gemara. All the, and so we'll go through it quickly. So it says Rav Shimon ben Yochai that in Kerem B'Yavna the Chachamim said that Torah will be forgotten from Klal Yisrael. Chas v'shalom, that so Rav Shimon ben Yochai comes to Chas v'shalom shetach Torah Yisrael because it says Kilos Shachan Pizarai. So the Rebbe here explains. He says that in the pasuk that Rav Shimon ben Yochai quoted is hidden the secret of Rashbi. Is Rav Shimon ben Yochai, because the pasuk he quotes is Kilos Shachan Pizarai, a pasuk in Vayelach, and he says the Sefer Tevis of Kilos Shachan Pizarai is Yochai. We all know when you go into Meron, you see at the end it says Kilos Shachan Pizarai, and it's you see that the Sefer Tevis are Yochai. So the first person to have reveal this was here, and then actually the Tifer Shlemer brings it, and he says B'Shem Svarim Kadoshim, which it could be because there was a snagdus, or for whatever reason, or you don't want to quote it, or maybe he just heard it B'Shem of the Svarim, and but this is the first place that it's ever brought. And then he says that he says in the Zohar Kodesh it says with the Sefer Kodesh with the Sefer Zohar Kodesh we're going to go out of Galus, and that's a pasuk you quoted from all the people that darshan about Rav Shimon ben Yochai before by Lag Baima. They all quote B'Hai Chibura Yifkim bin Galusa Barachme. That's what they all quote. The Rebbe doesn't quote Barachme, which I always wondered why. I don't know if anyone has an interesting, has a reason why. I'd love to hear why. So Breslov Chassidim say, B'hai Chibura, with this chibur of Lekutim Ran, the Iu Sefer Azariah, that is the beer of that explains Sefer Azariah, Yifkim bin Galusa will go out of Galus.
Who said that?
Breslov Chassidim say over this.
Who said this line? Reb Shimon
Oh,
said
so in the Zohar Kodesh it says B'hai Chibura Yifkim bin Galusa. Yeah, it's Zohar Kodesh and Parsha Nosoi. That's Zohar Kodesh Parsha Nosoi. Kuf Chavan Aleph. That's what he quotes as. That with the Sefer Azariah we're going to go out of Galus. So what that means is many different explanations that many Svarim give. That some say so.
Shimon said it himself.
Yeah, Shimon himself says that with the Sefer we're going to go out. The Degel Machne Ephraim says in Parsha B'Shalach, because it says Bnei Yisrael Yotzim B'Yad B'Ramah, and the Targum there says Bereish Galei. Bereish is Rashbi. Rosh Tevis Rashim Bayichai, and it's also Bereish Galei, and Galei is lag. And he also says it's also Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem, because we all know that the Toldus brings that there was a letter that he wrote to his brother-in-law, Rabbi Gershon Kittevad, and never made it to him, where the Baal Shem Tov said he went up to, on Rosh Hashanah, he ascended to Mashiach's Heichal, and asked him, when are you going to come? He said, he said, when your teachings will be spread all over the world, when the Baal Shem Tov teaching will be spread, which also explained the Zohar Kodesh, which of course Reb Nachman was his great grandson. He said that's when he will come. So you could put it all together, right? The Baal Shem Tov's yard set is on Shavuos, which we're leading up to, right? The Tov days started. Baal Shem Tov's yard set is Shavuos.
First or second?
It's a machlokes. It's a big machlokes because in one of the sons of the Talmud Yaakov Yosef, he has a siddur that, and he had written in the siddur that the Baal Shem Tov passed away on Wednesday Shavuos, and Wednesday could only be the first day Shavuos. I want to say the second day. So some people say it happened Ben Shmoshes, and some held it depends who. So let's say the Balatanya held, goes with holds that we go with the early Shkia, and others go with the late Shkia, with the Rebbeinu Tam Shkia. So that's what I've heard people say, but really it's irrelevant which day Shavuos it is. That's the Dovid Melech Pashat was in the first. But either way, because we know that the Torah really, at least according to Rabbi Yossi, was given on the 51st day, right? Not on the 50th day. But whatever. That's beyond this conversation. But so in this piece, Reb Nachman says that Reb Shimon is Maram is in another pasuk in Daniel. Irvik Kadosh Ben Shemai Nachas, the Rosh Tevis of Shimon. There's a pasuk there, so I want to. So bottom line, he says Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says Kilos Shachon Pizarai. So in this piece of that Likutei Halachos that I quoted before, in the next piece, he says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Elu v'elu divrei l'Kan Chaim." Either Torah is going to be forgotten or not forgotten. So Rav Nosson explains, even in a matzav of forgetting, even when Yidden are going to fall so low, like we discussed before, even if a Yid falls to the lowest level and he could scream at Ayim Kan Kavodai, that Yid could come back. That's pshat. Rav Shimon's teaching us, Kiloi Shachon Pizari. There's always hope for everyone. And in Vayelech, where he speaks about this, it's I think it's 3 pesukim after, where it says Vanochi Hasta Asta Yemahu, which talks about how mamish things are going to be hidden. That's Megillah Esther is Maramas there. So it's talking about in the darkest times. Reb Shimon teaches us Kiloi Shachon Pizari. Torah will not be forgotten, and there's many different explanations we could give what that means. But I want to say, I want to connect this to. There's another Torah. Reish Yud Zayin, where he explains that Zichra Torah Moshe is Rosh Tevis Tammuz, missing the Vav, and he says it's also Zman Matan Teresenu, because the Luchas were broken in Tammuz. It's missing the Vav because the Luchas measured 6 by 6. Vav is 6. The Gemara says it measured 6 by 6, and the Gemara there says, the Gemara in Eruvin says, if the first Luchas never would have been broken, Torah would never be forgotten. But now that the Luchas are broken, Torah is forgotten. But now Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is the one that comes and teaches us, Kiloi Shachon Pizari, Torah will not be forgotten. So putting this all together, we said that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai said, "Ki lo yishacham pizaroi Rosh Sefer Teves Yerchai." If you take the Rosh Teves, it spells Kol Tammuz. So I'm going to say it spells Kol Tammuz without a vav. Because it says it's Maram is Kol Tammuz. You need the whole Tammuz with the vav. You need to put the vav back into Tammuz to remember Torah. Now, what's the vav? That's the actually I heard from Rav Avram Moshe Vassilsky Shlita in Williamsburg. I'm sure you all know. So he told me that there was a Rav, the Kiviyasha Rav, who I believe was I think it was the anacle of the Tzvilah Tzaddik. So he says about this Torah of the Rebbe. He says we know something Yechai with the aleph, something without an aleph. He said if you spell it without an aleph, then it would spell Kisi Chas V'Shalom, Kisi Shachan Pizarai. If you spell it without an aleph, like the way it's spelled in sometimes in Nigla. In this, it's always with the Yechai with the aleph. Chas V'Shalom. Then it's Kid Tammuz. Then it spells Kid Tammuz like Tammuz. If it's put in the aleph of Yechai, then you get the Ki Lois Shachan Pizarei. That's what the Kiviyasha Rav. He said so. Taking this word so if you put in the aleph from the Yechai, then you have Ki Lois Shachan Pizarei. So it will not be forgotten, and that's Kol Tammuz putting in the vav. So now, what does that mean? You have to work on the forgetting of on this inyan of. So I want to say maybe it's Maram is what's vav Torah vav L'Kutei Moharan. What's Torah vav? One part I want to bring in. Imasek Shemayim Shamata V'Tzias Yalinaka. The Rebbe teaches if you're mamish tzaddik, you're going up, you still got to go further. V'Tzias Yalinaka, you're in the lowest madrega. Know that Rabbi Shalom is there with you. Strengthen yourself, pick yourself up, and pull yourself out of the lowest level. So I want to say we all know the Gemara in Shabbos Lamed Gimel, right? The Sar Shalom says it's Maram Zeh Daf Lamed Gimel is Lag, and he also said one of his Talmidim, I think it was Rav Shalom Kamenka, said it was the 33rd time that Rav Shimon is mentioned in Shas, and when he said this over, his son Rav Sheila ran out of the room. He said, "Where'd your son go?" He went to go check it out. And he went into the base medrash and he went through Shas and he said, yes, it's the 33rd time in Shas that it says that. It says this is brought in Gedai Rabbi Shimon, which is a sefer from the Shvili Pinchas Friedman Shlita, which he brings 68 mamarim on the fascinating mamarim on Rav Shimon Bar Yochai on Lag Baima. So he brings that in there. So the point I want to bring out from that Gemara, we all know the story that Rav Shimon was in the cave. He comes out of the cave, and him and his son see everyone there. Isaac and El Mazar, they're right there. They're planting, and they burn up everything they see. They go and they go back to the cave. And Rav Shimon says, Mishpat Rishon in Gehenim is 12 months. The biggest judgment is 12 months in Gehenim. So the Rechaim Pelagi has a son, Rav Avram Pelagi. And he has a son, he has a sefer. I saw it in the end of the Mesivta Gemara. On this Gemara, at the end of the Mesivta, he brings, and I looked it up in the sefer I found in Hebrew books. It's like a very old print, hard to read, but I went to go check up to see the actual word. He says he looked with a bad eye at other Yidden. Rav Shimon was saying, and the Nesivos Shalom says it's Mahalach. He says he looked bad. He was looking bad at other Yidden. So he judged himself. I have to judge myself like in Gehenim, like the worst person. Like Rav Shimon saying this. So I want to say, maybe this Maram is Ivakad min Shemayim Nochis. The Rebbe says it's Maram is Rav Shimon. They says a fiery angel came down from heaven. Rav Shimon is Mama. She's flying in the sky. It's Rav Shimon. He's in the sky. But he said he came out and he saw our people. He says, I have to learn how to be these other people. He had to come down. He came down from Shemayim to understand other Yidden, like the way these other Sfarim explain. I have to understand the way that not everyone is like me. And that's why you see, he came out of the cave a year later, and his son is still burning up stuff. Rabbi Elazar is still burning up, and Rav Shimon healed everything. He fixed everything. He said, we have to understand that. That's why it was 13 years now. 13 is Ava. He had to come with the Midas Ava. He came out now saying, yes, we're tzaddikim, but not everyone could be like us, and like it says in the Sukkah, Daf Mem Hey. He says it's enough if it's just me and you. So Rav Shimon's coming, he has to come down, so to speak, to the level to see the way other Yidden is. Of course, Rav Shimon is Mesach Shemaim Shamato, but the tzaddik comes down to understand what other Yidden. So I want to say, so that's Marama's Erev Kaddish Shemayim Nachas, and it's mamash. She could. That's why Rashbi is same as your shivrei, like shivrei luchos, and this is so. Right, so they say in Zoya Kaddish Maram is, so this actually, the Pinchas brings, Friedman brings it, he brings in a sefer, many of these Ramazim, like about Rashbi is Oisha Shivrei, and I actually want, it's there's mamash, it's endless. I have a whole
Interesting parallel that you're saying between Moshe Rabbeinu going up and down and Shimon Bar Yochai.
Right. Right. So it's brought into as many Svarim bring the Smicha Chachamim and others, and in the Pinchas Friedman brings many of them in the Sefer that it says that Chevy, Chevy is Rosh Shimon Bar Yochai. That is in many Ramazim there, and in the Zoya Kaddish Maram is that in the second Luchais that Rav Shimon gives us the koyach gives us that koyach, and that's why Rav Shimon speaks about how on
What does Chevy mean?
Chevy is Rosh Shimon Bar Yochai. Chevy is captured because what's the pasuk there? Alisa Lamarim Alisa Lamarim Shavisa Chevy, I think, which is. He said he went out, so it's Maram is it with the schos of Shimon Bar Yochai. That's how, and this is brought to many speak about this in many different Ramazim, that the Shivrei Luchas that Rav Shimon teaches us how through the brokenness, the Shivrei, this is the whole Indian, all tzaddikim teach us, the Shivrei, the brokenness, that we're able to pick ourselves up. That's the lesson of Aye. That's the lesson, and in Likutei Halachos he speaks about this. He speaks about this about the Shivrei Luchos. The message of the Shivrei Luchos is that even when he gets broken, he could pick himself up. I think in Hilchos Nefilas Apayim, I think in Likutei Halachos he mentions that. I have it in this. If anybody wants, I could email them to them. It's a whole. I think it's mentioned in there. And it can almost go on forever about this. But the bottom line is that in Likutei Moran, the Rebbe gives us mamish eitzos. So, because like I started with, many people say, like, where'd it come from? Bottom line is from Reb Shimon, from all the bottom line is you can look through all the Chazal. Chazal is just full of chizik. We can't always see it, but in Likutei Moran, he mamish gives us endless chizik. And it's there for everyone to take. You don't have to be a Breslov. You don't have to call yourself a Breslov. Like I actually heard from Rav Vasilsky. The Rebbe says before Mashiach comes, everyone's going to be Breslov Hasidim. And this triggers many people. What do you mean? So he told me, he said maybe this is what it can mean. He said a beautiful explanation. He said years ago, you didn't hear chizik, like you hear today, like mashkichim all over the place, in all different yeshivas. They give beautiful chizik. Nekudas Torahs, look for the good points. Don't worry about what you did. Just don't look back. Look forward, and don't worry what happened in the past. And just pick it. You never heard the sprach. This is mamash azamra. So he says, who cares if they quote the Rebbe? They don't quote it. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is we want Yidden to have chizik, and they're right. They bring. I'm not sure where. Maybe in. Where they bring it, but maybe it's an oral tradition, and that they bring that the Rebbe said that if people aren't going to listen, just say things not in my name, even. So the bottom line is, so he says that's the chizik that we see all over that years ago you didn't hear anyway, that you hear all over the place. And the bottom line is we have endless chizik that people could take from Likutei Moran and from all the Sefer Baal Shem Tov. You could see there's mamash chizik and all of them, and we should. Bottom line is that there's, no matter where we are, hope, and not only that, what I always say is the Breslov Yetzirah. What's the Breslov Yetzirah? The teachings are so powerful. I say, yeah, but stay in the gutter your whole life. Just stay in the gutter. But stay in the gutter. But yeah, I'm good in the gutter. Don't stay in the gutter, because I think in Sichas Aran, I think like I involved, the Rebbe says, you should learn every year. You should learn all the Shas, all the Shulchan Aruch, right? I'm sure you know, right? You've seen this. What did you should go through it? And we look at it and we say, but maybe saying Ain't Shemish Clouds. Who says you can't do this? So Who says you can't learn all that Reb Chaim did one day? Maybe one day you'll do it. So, of course, you'll be a fool if you say, I'm going to just all time. But one day at a time. So add, for one guy, maybe it's learning one pasuk a day. For another guy, it's learning 5 minutes a day. For another guy, it's learning another blot a day. For another guy, it's another hour a day. Everyone has a little past your limit, right? Right? The Gemara says, right, you can't consider learning 101 like learning 100. So the famous Tanya says, because the normal back then was 100. So 101 was past the limit. So say whatever each person's limit is. If my limit is I can learn 5 minutes, so if I can learn 6 minutes, that's past my limit. And before you never know where we could get. So that's why I think the ancient years is also don't stay in the gutter, y'all. Like if we're stuck in the gutter, Gavalik, that's where we are, and strengthen yourself as much as you can. But we have to keep on doing that. So we should try to lift ourselves up as much as we can, and we never know. Maybe one day we could be tzaddikim, right? V'amakul and tzaddikim, right? We really are. We all are chiluk kamemal mamish, which actually we all know the Tanya says it, but the Rebbe says it in Reish Samach. The Rebbe says we're chiluk al kamemal mamish. The Rebbe says that himself there. Then that's. So we are that, and when we connect to that, we're unlimited to what we could do, and that's the Yisrael in every year that we could connect to, and we can always go on about this forever, but we should all have a good Pesach Sheni, a good Lag BaOmer, and we should just continue being mechazik ourselves.
We're learning today, Shavila Nishma Seisha, Chana Bas Menachem Mendel, Shem Shem Aliyah. Shkaya.